Welcome to the Marvelous Moms Club podcast. Discover yourself, break out of mediocrity, and become the mom you've always aspired to be. Here's your host, Kirsten Tyrell.
Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode. Yay, we're good. Natalie and I tried this interview this morning and we had internet problems on my end, and every time I hit record, she couldn't hear me, and so I was super nervous to hit record again, but we're good. So
yeah.
My dear friend Natalie is joining me on the podcast today, who I've been so excited to have on here for a long time, and because of life circumstances, it's taken a little while to get her here, but you're here now. Natalie
Yes,
Peterson.
I am.
The lovely Natalie Peterson, everybody.
I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited we finally found a day that we could do this. I'm excited.
Me too. And you're like, I was going to say, you're maybe like one of the last people that I will interview that I met on Periscope, because I feel like I've gone through so many of those people.
Yes.
But there's still a few stragglers. Like, there's still a few like this where it's like, we have to reschedule, and it's okay because we're all like buddies. And
it's so true.
I had total sadness the other night. I got on Periscope because I was just like, I just want to talk to all my friends. And like, nobody was on there. A few people.
I know. I'm like, does
hurts.
anybody do it anymore? I haven't gone on forever either.
No.
And I was just remembering, I'm like, I think that was almost a year ago that we were like all connecting like a ton and stuff too.
Yeah, it was, because it was really soon after I started this podcast that I discovered Periscope. So it's crazy what a year has done and how many friendships were made.
I totally.
I'll miss talking about it because I talked about it a lot last year. Oh well. So you have a pretty interesting story, which is like one of the reasons I wanted you to be on here. Another just because I love you, and I think you have the sweetest, most like bubbly, positive personality, and I loved watching your live streams. You are such a dedicated mother. So tell everybody about your son and just kind of like your experience and your birth into motherhood, because it's not just, you don't just birth the child, like even whether you adopt or foster or whatever, like you are birthed into this whole new role. So
yes,
you tell everybody your experience.
That is very true. Okay. Yeah. So I'll kind of share a little background story of Garrett. So Garrett, when I was pregnant with Garrett, when I was about like 25 weeks pregnant, I actually found out that he had a heart defect, and it was a pretty severe one. We're here in Utah, and so I'd gone to a specialist at Primary Children's, and they had been able to diagnose like through fetal echocardiogram, which I didn't even know existed. But they were able to diagnose and tell us exactly what his heart defect was, which I was so grateful for that we knew ahead of time, especially given how things turned out. And so my pregnancy went really well. I mean, I had a very healthy, normal pregnancy. Just Garrett's problems actually weren't an issue until he was born. So I carried him full term. And when he was born, he had the heart defect they had said he had. And my delivery with him was really, really rough and hard. And so he was born not breathing at all on his own. And so immediately after he was born, they had to put a breathing tube in him and put him onto a ventilator. And we did not hear anything for about 5 hours after he was born. And so I didn't know if he had passed away or what was going on, because nobody, we would send people in to come back and tell us something, and nobody could tell us anything. And it was awful. It was horrible. It was awful. And so a few hours later, I had delivered at the University of Utah hospital. And so they came in and they said, Garrett is really, really sick. He's not doing well, and we need to take him to Primary Children's right now. And so we were like, okay. And I still hadn't seen him, neither had my husband. And they said, you can come see him for a few minutes before we take him over. And so they rolled us in, and I saw him in a little, a life flight incubator. And he was just this tiny, perfect little boy, and all of these tubes and wires. And that was so dramatic to me, because that is not all of our, siblings and cousins who have had kids. They all,
don't normal and standard.
They come home a few days later. And I think I don't think there's any way I could have prepared myself for that situation. Do you know what I mean? Like, I
Right.
think even like being told that he might be that sick and things like that, I couldn't, I don't think there's any way you can prepare yourself. So
It's almost like motherhood in general. Like people tell you you're not going to get sleep. It's going to be really hard. And you're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then you have it and you're like, this is hard. How come nobody told me?
it's so true.
You
It is
know?
so true.
Yeah.
Yes, I totally agree. I totally agree with you. So yeah, so he was transported over to primaries from there. And it was just kind of touch and go for the first couple days, especially. Garrett's problem was, so his heart defect caused not only a heart problem, but airway problems
Mm-hmm.
because his heart had grown, his pulmonary arteries that are connected to his heart had grown so enlarged. They were, as surgeons had called them, they were gigantic. They were like 3 times the size they
Wow.
should be because he did not have a pulmonary valve in his heart. And so because of that, laying on his back, he could not tolerate at all. So if he was on his back, he would like turn blue instantly. A diaper change, like anything like that, like
Wow.
a little thing that like a normal baby just like cries a little bit about, any type of crying or any type of repositioning or any med or even moving his head from side to side would make him completely turn blue, almost to the point of like needing like chest compressions, but he never got to that point, luckily. But this was like a daily occurrence for
Oh my
weeks.
gosh.
And so we had to keep him completely sedated and he had to be on his belly. And so that's how he lived for like the first 3 weeks of his life. And I was not able to ever hold him. Like I couldn't hold him or anything. Because just holding him like upwards in my arms and stuff, like would be enough that he would stop breathing. So,
Wow.
it was really hard. And especially with like my first baby, and I love babies. Like if
Mm-hmm.
anyone who knows me, I am like obsessed with babies. Like I love babies. Like my mom always joked that growing up at church, if she couldn't find me after church was over, she was just like, okay, who has the new baby in the ward? And I was like, hi, can I hold your baby? Like that was totally me, And so
Yeah.
that was really hard on me, not being able to hold him. But at 3 weeks old, Garrett had open heart surgery. And that is what we were hoping would get him better and get him to the point that we would be able to get him home. And that was kind of our hope.
Yeah.
So he had his open heart surgery and they were able to fix his heart problems, but there was nothing out there to do for his airways. And so they pretty much were just saying time and being on a ventilator and things like that should help his airways get better and stronger. And then he'll be able to come home.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's kind of, what we were thinking. And so weeks after surgery and things, Garrett was still in the NICU. So he was still needing ICU care. And he'd recovered from his heart surgery, but almost like every couple days we were like going higher on ventilator settings. And it was kind of like we were going backwards,
Mm-hmm.
all the time. And we never felt like we were going forwards. And he was still having blue spells is what we would call them, where he would, cry, get upset like a normal baby, and he would turn completely blue.
Oh my gosh,
And
that's so
so
scary.
it was awful. It was awful because you never know, like, are one of those times going to be the end? You know what I mean? Like, it was awful. It was so, so hard. And so months went by. Like, Garrett was in the NICU for 10 months. And we were he'd have like some good days, but most of the days he was like just still struggling really a lot. And it was hard because there was nothing I could do to fix it and nothing that like was out there to help him at the time, get better and get home. Cause that was always our goal. I'm like, I just want to get him home. I just want to get him home. And during this time we, had talked to like many doctors, and he had a trach placed, which is like a breathing tube in his neck. And that is like it's a much more stable airway.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what their hope was, let's get him a stable airway and hopefully that'll help him breathe better and he'll be able to get home and all these things. And it never helped him that much.
Wow.
No more than being intubated. And so, anyway, and during this time, like our schedule, like my entire day consisted of staying at the hospital
That's
with
what I was going
Garrett.
to ask
So
you. Like,
yeah,
how do you even pretend to have a normal functioning life?
who can't? Like it was hard. Like I'm not gonna lie, it was so hard. But it was so worth it, obviously. Like
Mm-hmm.
like I'd have obviously like we all have our moments, and literally I would like get up, get dressed, go to the hospital. Usually my mom and I would go to the hospital together. We would stay there all day, usually grab lunch like in the cafeteria at some point in time. And then Jake was at work because he had to work because
Mm-hmm.
this was such a long period of time. And
Right.
so
10 months.
he was, yeah, and he was at work. And so he would come up with my dad usually after work. And then he and I would stay until like 10 or 11 every night.
What would you do all day? I mean, obviously, you would probably like be with Garrett, but
Right. We were able to, as he got a little bit better and he got his trach, he would have his good days where he wasn't turning blue constantly, but so we would be able to get him out and hold him, read to him and play with him, and he'd have like physical therapists come, and I wanted to learn everything I could about Garrett. Like that, my husband and I, like Jake is amazing. I could not have done all of this without him and his support, and but we would just, you know, go and take care of him essentially. Like the nurses pretty much taught me how to give meds, how to suction him, how to pretty much do everything except for like IV stuff, which they
mm-hmm.
would do. But, like we learned how to do trach cares and like G tubes, all these things that like usually the hospital can just do, but I wanted to learn how to do it because
Mm-hmm.
that I felt like that is how I could be his mom. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I wasn't able, like every diaper change I wanted to change, and do you know what I mean? Because that
Mm-hmm.
just made me feel like, oh, I am his mom,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
every night I had to leave without him, which was awful. Like I
Ugh.
just remember some nights like leaving, just like crying the whole like 40-minute drive home because it was like a 40-minute drive every day there and back, and just being like, oh, this is not fair, and I don't want to do this, but every day I would get there and I'd be with Garrett and I'd hold him, and it made it all worth it. Like it was, I mean, instantly it was like, this is worth it. Like one
Yeah.
smile or something just makes it all worth it. I mean, you do anything for your kids,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what people would ask me all the time is, oh, I couldn't do that. There's no way. And I was like, you could, you
You
totally,
would. Yeah.
and you would. You
Yeah.
would do the same thing. If tomorrow something happened to your child and you found yourself in a hospital for months on end, you would do it. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Right.
And I think the good thing is that we can't see the future sometimes
Yeah.
because we can take it one day at a time. And do you know what I mean?
That's
Like
so true.
next hour, get through the next like day. Let's just, because that's sometimes how it was with Garrett. Like I'm like, oh, I just need to get through today. I just need to get through till Tuesday. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like anyway, and that helped a lot too. So
So how long was he in there total? Because I know it was more than 10 months.
it was a lot longer. So he was in the NICU for 10 months, and then he was then transported to like it's like a long-term care facility that took children who were on hospital ventilators trying to get to the home vent, because that was our goal. After we realized he wasn't going to come off of his ventilator, our goal was, let's get him on a home ventilator,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll be able to get him home. Like that was always our goal. And so he struggled so much with it because they kind of explain it like a hospital ventilator is kind of like the Mercedes, of
Mm-hmm.
like ventilators.
Ventilators.
You have like, I don't know what's another, like, then the home vent's kind of like a,
Like a
I don't
Cadillac,
know.
or is that still too fancy?
Oh, that would be, no, something like that. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know, something like lower, I guess, on the totem pole of cars. But so that's they just don't work. They don't work as well. They're
Yeah.
not as sensitive. They're not as strong and everything. And so he could not tolerate being on a home ventilator. And so that was so hard for me because I'm like, oh, I can do like pretty much especially by the time he was like, 10, 12, 15 months old, I'm like, I can do all this at home.
Yeah.
Like nurses would pretty much just come in and be like, here's his meds. He needs this, he needs that. And I'm like, okay. And then I was just pretty much doing the nurse mom thing, and which was not easy for me to do because growing up, I was like the one, if someone cut their finger, I'm like, oh, out, like,
That's
go show mom.
me. Oh,
That is totally how I was. And so
yeah, that's
have
awful.
like being a nurse is totally like the last thing I ever thought I would be doing, and
Yeah.
now that, and it just was like second nature, to me, like doing it for Garrett and stuff. And
Mhm.
I have so much respect for nurses. That is for sure. We've met amazing nurses and doctors and things throughout the way. But so Garrett was um, back and forth pretty much between the hospital and this care center that we were trying to get him on a ventilator. And in December of 2013, he got a really bad virus that landed us back in primary children's ICU. And they were pretty much telling us, like, there's nothing more we can do. His kidney like function was starting to shut down. Like his kidneys were shutting down. His lungs were having so many problems because of the high pressure of the ventilator he was needing and
Oh,
things. Like
wow.
Garrett was on 3 times the amount of like ventilator pressure that most children his age even need. Like it was huge.
Wow.
And so his lungs were getting so big that they were actually like separating his rib cages. I mean, it was bad. It was really bad.
Wow.
And anyway, so during this time, a couple months previous to this, before we'd been able to try the home vent, Jake and I had found this article that had been posted on CNN. It was like a brand new article out and about this procedure where they would take your airway and do a CT scan and print these splints on a 3D printer. And they would be able to customize your airway. And we read all about it. And we read about this little boy that had the procedure who sounded just like Garrett. And I read it and I called Jake like immediately because I was at the hospital with Garrett and somebody had given me the article. And I was like, we need to call these doctors. Like, this sounds just like Garrett.
Yeah.
And it kind of sounds crazy, but Jake literally picked up the phone and called University of Michigan and asked to talk to Dr. Green, who was in the article. And it was amazing. I mean, we talked to him on the phone, and within like a matter of a couple days to a week, they were really interested in Garrett's case. And so they said, we'd love to see scans and all these things. So we sent them a bunch of scans over. And after they got all the scans and we talked to Dr. Green again, he said, I can help him get off his ventilator. And we were like, what?
Off
Like,
his ventilator.
how sick he is? Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. And so he said, no, I really do. I feel like I can get him off his ventilator. And so, anyway, so long story short, a few months later, we kind of just at the time, we just didn't feel like it was right. And we wanted to give Garrett a chance to not, do it on his own and not have to have a major surgery because it was a major surgery and it was in Michigan. And we're like, how are we going to get there? Like, how, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was insane. And so, anyway, we called him after when Garrett got really sick and talked to him. And we literally talked to him on a Sunday. And the following Friday, we were on a plane heading to Michigan.
Wow.
Like insane. It was a miracle though. Like it really was. And that's another thing I could say too is, through all this experience in the hospital and stuff, I think one of the things that, I learned and like, I'm still learning, but, is to like, that we all have an intuition and, whether you want to call it intuition or, the spirit prompting you to do something, it definitely is real. And I feel like there were so many times, especially because I did not go to medical school. I'm not a nurse. I'm just a mom, And so there were so many times though, like more times than I can count, where things would like come to my mind to ask certain questions, or I would show up at the hospital at the exact time I needed to be there to help Garrett. Like there was this one night in particular that I showed up to the hospital and the doctor, they were doing something with Garrett and they're like, he's not doing well right now. You can't go back is like what the front desk was telling me. They're like, I think Garrett's had a blue spell and they don't want you back there. And so I was like, oh my gosh. And so I stood there for about like 10 or 15 seconds before I got this like strong feeling to just go back anyway. And so I just walked back. Like I just walked right past the guy and walked back. I was like, I really don't even care. Like, so I walked back there and Garrett wasn't doing very good. And so it came to my head, like, we need to do this, this, and this, and it'll help him get better. And so they like did the couple things that I had thought. I was like, we need to sit him up. We need to roll him over. We need to do this. And his numbers are going to look better in like a half an hour. And they were like, okay, let's do it. And so they like did all of that. And within a half an hour, like his numbers were exactly normal again, which was amazing. And there were many times when things like that happened. And sometimes I think, you know, especially in the medical field or doctors, we're like nervous to stand up to them or their opinion, or do you know what I mean? Or try to help, because we didn't go to school for this. Do you know what I mean? But that's one thing I've learned, is that they are very respectful of, like, you know, the parents and the knowledge that you have. Cause they're like, you know, your kids more than we do. I mean, yeah, we're doctors, but you know them in a different way. You know what I mean? So,
and that mother's intuition, you're not the first person I've had say that. There's an episode that as of now hasn't aired. Same thing. And the mom just like, there were things that she just knew and things that only she could know. And just because she, like, I don't know, that's so true. Like, mothers have a unique gift to have that inspiration for their children.
I totally agree with you. I completely agree. And there was even one time too where when we were traveling to Michigan and they had brought Garrett's transport ventilator, which this sounds so confusing, but all these ventilators were different. And so they had come and put him on this ventilator with certain settings and things like that. And I had like all of his settings memorized, like, you know, forward and backwards. And I knew how he reacted to everything. And so they had put him on these settings and his numbers started to go bad. And so I just got a strong feeling again to just say, Natalie, you need to tell him what the settings should be. And so I literally walked over and was like, I think we need to do this, that, this number there, this number. And within like 5 minutes, he was like perfect and was great the whole entire like 4-hour flight. And so I'm like, you just, you know, like, you need to stand up, like when you get those feelings and stuff, like follow through. And I feel like if the more we do follow through and respond to those like intuitions or promptings or whatever, the more we're going to get them.
Right.
And so I feel like we need to, you know, we all can be better at it too, you know.
Yeah. And that doesn't just apply to like your situation. That's all the time. Like that's in general, the more we open ourselves up to like help, because I feel like as a mom, sometimes I'm super independent and I just think, it's not that I'm deliberately thinking I can do this on my own. I don't need any help from God or anything, but it's like, when I actually ask for it and I accept it, it's so much easier. And I'm like, why do I try and do this on my own? Why don't I listen for like the little voice that tells me what to do in this moment? And so I love that. I love that you listened.
So yes. And I think, you know, it's definitely something I still am working on and things, but that's one thing I definitely have learned a lot from is, you know, when you get those feelings and inspirations or whatever to follow through with them. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So we were in Michigan for Garrett was there and not doing well. And the doctors were still telling us, you know, like I feel like we're going to be able to get him off his ventilator and everything. And a couple weeks went by and we had his surgery, and Garrett came out of surgery like when we were waiting in the waiting room, like it was like an 8-hour surgery.
Wow.
So talk about the longest day of your life. Yeah. And every update, we would get an update about once an hour. And it was usually one of the residents came up, like who was in the surgery would come up and give us like a face-to-face update, which was so nice. And I could always tell, like, as he was walking close, you know, like how his face looked or whatever, you know, you're just like, is everything okay? And they're like, and every time he came up, he's like, everything is going great. Everything is going perfect. Awesome. And we're just like, oh, okay. We can make it another hour. And so at the very end, up walks the doctor, Dr. Green, so Garrett's surgeon and ENT surgeon, and then also his heart surgeon and one of the residents walk up, and they just have the biggest smiles on their faces. And I'm like, this is good. Like, this is really good. And so they walked up and Dr. Green was just like, he's doing awesome. He's on half the ventilator support he was on when he went into surgery. Wow. And it literally was a miracle. Like we were shocked, you know? And so, we were in Michigan for 2 more months though. So, and that it was scary to go like to Michigan too, because it was a huge leap of faith because we didn't know like where we were going to stay, or like we didn't even know these doctors that we were flying. We're like, so we're taking our medically fragile child to these doctors that I've talked to on the phone twice. Like, what am I doing? But we knew it was his only chance. Like, that's what we kept telling ourselves. We're like, this is his chance. This is his only chance. He needs something. He needs help. And so he's not going to get better on his own. And, so we were there for 3 months total. And, but Garrett, after surgery, just the first couple weeks were rough, but after that, it was like every day we would go and he was getting better and better and better and needing less medications and less IVs. And pretty much we got to the point within a matter of weeks that he was on a home ventilator, on the lowest home ventilator settings you can even be on a ventilator, which was insane. And so we brought him home for the first time when he was 19 months old. So he was just 3 days shy of 19 months old. It was on April 1st of 2014. So
did you just sob your face off?
Oh my gosh. It just didn't seem real. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like we came home and it was so sweet. We had like family like that had lined the streets, and Jake's parents had like this sign made that said, because we would call him Garrett the Brave. That was kind of like our little name for him. And so they'd made this sign for him that said Garrett the Brave. And it was amazing. I mean, it was a day we never thought would happen. Like, we never thought we'd be able to bring him home, like at first we're like, oh, we're going to be able to bring him home. But as more time went on, we're just like, I don't think he's going to make it. I don't think we're going to be able to ever bring him home. And just to be able to have him home was, I mean, it was a miracle. Like, there have been so many miracles, and that's the only word I can use to describe it in Garrett's life. I mean, it really has been like doctors that he needed at the right time, and the ventilators he needed, and all these things, like, it all just fell into place because, if Garrett would have been born 5 years ago, or, well, he was almost born 5 years ago, but 5 years before his time, then I don't think he definitely wouldn't have made it because of, he needed the medical advances to help him and things. And, it's all amazing. So it was a huge blessing and huge miracle. So he's our miracle boy.
Yeah, and he's doing really well now. Like,
he is doing
huge
so
progress.
good. He's doing so good. Yes. His ventilator's gone now, so he is completely ventilator free, and he doesn't even have to wear oxygen, which is amazing. His heart is doing great too. We're hoping he won't need another heart surgery for like years and years, but you never know. But, and his airways are working perfect. We haven't had one problem with the surgery, and he was only the second person to ever receive this surgery. I don't think I had mentioned that, but, and since then they actually, because of Garrett, and we did some interviews with, NPR and all these things after Garrett had his procedure. And since then, because of the interviews we did and the, how we got the word out, there's actually been like 4 or 5 other children that have been able to have the surgery, and they're all doing really good too. So it's amazing. It's amazing. So
not exactly what you pictured for motherhood, but
no, definitely not what I pictured at all.
I just remember I didn't even hear your full story. I knew like bits and pieces. Yeah. And I mean, I knew a big chunk of it because I know that you've shared it before on Periscope, but like, just, it overwhelms the people on the outside who we like feel like our normal life is hard. And when I say normal, just like the daily grind of having healthy children. So when you hear these stories, you're just like, oh, how do I complain? How does anybody have the stamina to, like, I mean, you go to really, really great lengths to keep him healthy and to keep like germs out of your house, and germs, like, I mean, it's a full-time brain job for you. It's not just like, okay, he's home. It's like, it's a lot.
That's exactly right. And that's a very good point, because yes, like, I think lots of people think like, oh, he's home now, because I'll have people say that, like, he's home now, so he must be doing great. And, and I'm like, no, he's doing really good, but he's he is very behind, like physically and mentally and things, just for being so sick and in the hospital for so long. And because of his trach, it prohibits him from being able to talk. And so he doesn't talk. He's making noises now, more than he has before, which is good. So we're hoping to start to see a speech therapist soon, now that he's starting to make noises. But he's still, it's ongoing things every day. Like, he still has a G tube that he eats through, which is like a little tube in his tummy. He doesn't eat by mouth. And so, and he has a low immune system. So yeah, we don't get to, we don't take him out tons. So it is a lot of time like spent at home. I'm home majority of the time. I don't get out very much. But
how were you before? Did that suit you, or was it hard adjustment? I mean, being in the hospital probably was like baptism by fire, right?
Yes. It is. Some days when I'm complaining, I just have to tell myself it is way better than the hospital. Like, I'm so grateful I'm home because of the hospital. But I am more of like a homebody personality, I guess, more than I am like going out. But I definitely have my days, especially during the winter, when like we stay home even more, because during the summer and stuff, we can get out quite a bit. But sometimes I'm just like, my husband will come home from work and I'm like, I need to go walk around Target for a couple hours. Like, I need to get out, I need to go do something, but, or something like that. But anyway, but we do lots of, we just find other things we can do. Like, we'll put Garrett in the car and go for a drive, or go get ice cream, or on like Saturdays, if we need to run errands, we'll usually just put him in the car and take turns running into stores and things like that. So we can still get out a little bit, but yeah, it is definitely, something that's harder some days than others. So we have lots of family around, which I'm so grateful for. Jake and I both grew up in the same town that we live in and stuff. Awesome. And so we have so much family around that helps. And my parents and Jake's parents stop by a lot to visit, and my mom is over here a lot helping me during the days with Garrett. So It's nice to have that adult conversation. Definitely. I think I'd go crazy if it was just me and Garrett all the time at home. So I'm grateful for visitors and people to hang out with. So.
I think any parent, we all feel a little bit crazy, like isolate. Why do you think I do this? So I can talk to other grown-ups and I can call it work.
Exactly. Like, I really need to talk to somebody older than 5 years old or something, what I mean?
Yeah, and somebody who can respond back in like full sentences, or in your case at all, like with any words.
Exactly.
Wow.
So true.
And you also have a blog, like Natalie's Mixing Bowl, right?
So it's actually an Instagram page. Okay. I need to start a blog. I should start a blog. So it's an Instagram page. I have Natalie's Mixing Bowl. And then, and I love it. It's so fun to post recipes, and I just love to bake and cook, like especially baking. It's totally a hobby of mine, and I've always loved it. But it's a fun little creative outlet for me that I can do since I am at home a lot of the time and stuff. So
that's awesome.
It's really fun. Yeah.
That's like the perfect hobby to have. Can you imagine if you were like super outdoorsy and like a skier and like a hiker? Oh, that would be so much harder.
It would be really, really hard. Yes. I definitely am. I love doing stuff around the house and things like that. So baking is totally like a creative outlet for me and stuff too. If I bake stuff though, I always have to like find somebody to send it to or give it to.
How do you stay so cute? Because you look pretty small. I don't know how you do that.
You're nice. Oh, I just try to send a lot of it away. That's the good thing about having family close. Then I can just like, here you go. I made this. Take it home with you.
That's awesome. I'm glad it keeps you busy. And I love following your page actually and seeing the things that you make. You're so talented. It's so funny. We can't all be good at the same things, but you always want the skills you can't have, the talents you can't have.
Right. Right.
I'm proud when I make a chocolate chip cookie that isn't flat. Like, that's accomplishment.
Hey, but being in Utah now, that totally is harder to do than California.
True. Maybe that's my problem.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, I'm blaming it on the oven and the altitude, because it is a bad oven. Well, you're adorable, and I'm so glad that you've been on here to share Garrett's story. So I want you to share like your biggest piece, because you've kind of shared stuff along the way, but your biggest piece of advice to parents who are kind of in a situation where they're basically living in the NICU, or they're living in the hospital for some purpose with their children, because there's a lot of them out there, right. Or even just preemptive for people who might end up in that situation someday, what's your biggest piece of advice or comfort or something that helped you?
I think a lot of it comes down to attitude. And I feel like in lots of the situations, I mean, it's hard sometimes to have a good attitude about things. But I think every day I just tried to find, especially when Garrett was in the hospital, like, one, what happened today that was good, whether it be like Garrett didn't have a blue spell, or I don't know, just any little thing, I just tried to focus. I tried to force myself to focus on the good things, because even when Garrett was in the hospital, we had some really good times and really good days. And I think, just like I said too, like, taking it one day at a time and not trying to think, oh, when are we going to leave here? Or what does the future look like? Because even now that overwhelms me. Like, sometimes if I think of it that way, if I'm like, what does 10 years or 5 years down the road look like? And it's like, Natalie, you can't go there. Like, you just need to be in the now and just try to focus on today. And I think that's, a big thing. And I think, like I said, attitude too. And I feel like, luckily, like, I'm so grateful for my husband, because he and I were always on the same page with everything. And I think that's been a huge blessing for us. And it definitely has strengthened our marriage, being able to go through this together and things like that. But yeah, I think just trying to focus on the good and trying to, and some days it was really, really hard to do. Some days there weren't tons of good things in the day, and I found myself crying the whole way home, but that's totally normal. Like, I think you need to let yourself be sad sometimes too. And that's okay, because it's hard. But yeah, and anyone who has to go through anything like this, like, my hat goes off to them. Like, it's definitely hard and it's a trial, but I can definitely look back now and say that I am so grateful that we went through that, with Garrett. And I feel like it's given me a different perspective on life in general. Do you know what I mean? Going through that. So, it's definitely changed me. And I feel like I hope I'm a better mom and things because of it, but he's definitely worth it. We just love him so much. So
yeah, I love it. You guys are so sweet. So even though you've summed this up for the last, half an hour, I have to ask, what makes you a marvelous mom?
Oh, you are so sweet. So I've been thinking about this, and I kind of came down to that. I feel like because of Garrett and because of all the challenges that he has, and how I've had to rise up to those challenges and things. I look at him and it makes me want to be a better mom. Like, he just makes me want to be a better mom. And he just makes me, remember to slow down and not take the little things for granted. And we just love him so much. And I'm just so grateful for that.
Yeah. I love that so much. Perfect answer. Well said. Thank you for coming on here and sharing this. And I am so glad you'll kind of have like an audio version of it too to share with him someday. I think that's what I love about these, like, blog posts, podcasts. They're so immortal, is that the right word?
For sure. Yeah, totally. They're there forever.
Yeah, they are. So thank you so much, Natalie, for coming on here and sharing that and just being a good example, because you totally are. Even though I haven't been through your exact experience, you're a good example of positivity and just having the right perspective. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thanks. You're so sweet. Thanks for asking me to talk with you today.
Absolutely. It was my honor. Everybody go follow Natalie on Instagram. Natalie, is it Natalie's Mixing Bowl or Natalie? Okay.
So it's Natalie's Mixing Bowl, and then I have my personal one, which is just the Natalie Peterson one.
Okay. Okay. Yep. Awesome. All right, guys. Thanks for listening and tuning in. And to the rest of you guys, have a marvelous day, and we'll see you on the next episode. As a busy mom who's also running multiple businesses, it's kind of hard for me sometimes to get healthy dinner on the table that my kids will actually eat, which is why I'm obsessed with HelloFresh. HelloFresh is going to help you get inspired again and again, be unstoppable, and eat deliciously with your family. They shop, plan, and deliver your food to your door. They give you step-by-step recipes and ingredients so you can just relax and enjoy all there is to love about cooking. And of course, eating. I know you'll love it as much as I do, so I'm offering you an amazing code. I'm not an affiliate, but this is just the best way to get it for the best price. Use code KIRTYRR to get $40 off your first HelloFresh box. This is an amazing, amazing deal, and I promise you will thank me later when you taste the food for the first time. So again, go check it out, HelloFresh.com, and use activation code KIRTYRR to get started today.